the water's fine, homie, jump into the deep end. Sow it, you will reap it. We talking how to start it, how to grow it, how to keep it. Take a deep breath. You are now rocking with Founder Secrets.
Hello, everybody. We got Ian Koons today, CEO, founder of Karoo Health. Welcome, Ian. Good to have you on, man.
Thanks, Flavio. Thanks, Taylor.
He's a friend, and I should qualify that I'm a teensy tiny investor. He probably even forgot I'm on the cap table.
He's like, oh, crap.
I'm down there in Cardiff.
I've been trying to kick him off the cap table for a long time. Just stays the cap table for too long.
One of those minnows, when a big whale comes, they just swallow us all up, and they keep going. But he's been really working to change healthcare, and we're going to talk about that and the journey and the success he's had. But first, our icebreaker is, what is the one time that the healthcare system really came through for you or your family? And I'll start. You don't think about healthcare until it kind of hits your family. And in my case, my dad had a stroke, my sister had cancer, and I remember they're not in the US, so I could speak to those healthcare systems too. But my sister needed an opinion on her cancer from a doctor in the US, and I just didn't realize to what extent cancer in the US is so many resources have gone into that, and so many docs. I think it seems like even though she was at a great treatment in Germany, the US doctor still had a lot of value to add, a lot of expertise, a lot of knowledge, also a lot of incredible bedside manner that I feel the US, at least in the cancer docs I've interacted with, just have like an incredible bedside manner that helps a patient so much in that critical time. So that was a great experience. Dr. Moore, North Carolina, shout out.
Shout out.
He's just yeah. So Taylor, what about you?
So I'll speak about this from a high level. So someone around me had some issues with addiction, and that part of so my interaction was I kind of spoke to some of the doctors as this was going on, as it became a kind of larger issue. And the initial interactions with the doctors, they weren't negative, but they weren't altogether positive. Like they weren't. You could tell that they're just overwhelmed. That these people in the emergency room there's a lot going on. And so I took a more forceful approach, which I'd encourage anyone to do. And I treated it like I would like a vendor that I'm beating up in the business, and was very direct and was very, hey, like this was an exact question I asked. Pretend that I'm a celebrity and we have unlimited money. What would you recommend to me then? And the answer that they gave was this very specific place to go. And they said, it's unbelievably expensive. And I said, perfect. More expensive, the better. And it wasn't because we wanted to spend unlimited money, but it was because I knew that if we broke out of the barrier of like, hey, stop worrying about insurance, stop worrying, I don't care. Just pretend that the only thing I care about is making this person healthy and getting them to a good place. Where do we go? And they were like, you should go to this place that was 3 hours away. And we got in. By the way, we got in. It was an amazing facility, but we got in. It cost nothing. Insurance ended up covering it anyway, but they weren't going to recommend it because who knows for what reason. And everything worked out. And this person in my life is sober and it really worked out. But so it turned into a positive story. But I think what I took away from that, and I broke my tooth. I broke my tooth, Fabio. You were actually there when I broke it in Ibiza, and that also became one of those situations where I had to be very, very forceful and got multiple recommendations about what would you. And so my learning through all this was to be an extremely forceful pusher, an advocate of one's own healthcare, and be nice, but. My takeaway was be a bit of a steamroller and push and ask lots of questions and advocate for yourself or for those around you.
Yeah,
what about you, Ian?
I think that's spot on. I don't think, talking about this question, I don't think I'm a great representative of this particular question in terms of the healthcare system. I've been fortunate and blessed to grow up the son of an OBGYN, where it was a little bit old school, where, if I broke my arm for the 13th time, he would call the doctor at Georgetown and go around the back of the hospital, get me casted and get me out. And then, as I've dedicated my life and career to healthcare, specifically cardiology, I think I'm in a unique position where I think at this point, the last time I checked, I think I've had 400 or 500 doctors in my phone. And so there's an added benefit to that to accelerate. And as you said, Taylor, kind of advocate for that care. I think something positive, negative but positive. Recently, there's someone near and dear to my heart that's actually going through, a really tough, kind of treatment now. And it was through that and the connections where we were able to, make a bunch of calls and get her for treatment into Hopkins, which is, top notch specifically for what we're dealing with. So, not a great representative, but, I think that's been my experience that has been ultimately positive with dedicating my, kind of career and family's career to, serving others.
Awesome. Well, so let's jump to Karoo Health. What is Karoo and what made you start it?
Yeah, I'll talk about the origin story. I think I've said this on other kind of podcasts, but I think just important to kind of provide the framework. I really started Karoo under the kind of the unfortunate, my best friend had passed away of a heart attack at 29. Wow. And so always wanted to creating a technology and or a care delivery model that would have prevented the outcomes of the people I love. The light bulb went off and my co-founder and I ended up kind of doing a deep dive on the current state of cardiovascular care. Through that, we had gotten connected to kind of the research and Mark McClellan, and he was commissioned by the American Heart Association, basically say like, why the hell are outcomes getting worse, not better, when nephrology, oncology, all these other, disease states have made notable advances, but cardiovascular, the largest, hasn't. And unsurprisingly, the results were there's no value-based care and kind of general misaligned incentives with providers. So we ended up going to cardiologists all over the country, and we would ask them one simple question, which is, if you had unlimited, tailored to you, if you had unlimited time and resources, how would you, kind of build this delivery model? And they universally came back and said it had to be this hybrid delivery model where we're kind of enabling that transition from volume to value through those wraparound services, and the technology in which we deploy, really working side by side with our cardiologist partners. So one of our kind of ethos, which is completely kind of contrary to a typical value-based care company, is historically you had these VBC companies get delegation from the payer, and they would work seemingly around the providers, and the providers would throw up their hands and are like, who the hell are you and why are you managing my patients? And we all know the outcomes have been terrible and they haven't really moved the needle. And so instead we said, regardless of financial construct or entry point, our closest relationship will always be with that network and those cardiologists, really effectuating their care plan. And, we've done that with, amazing success that's kind of far surpassed, anybody in the industry. So, right now we're enrolling about 89% of our patients are consenting to the program. To put that into perspective, the national average is like 25%. We have a 98% digital engagement rate. So they're engaging regularly via SMS text. So we stripped away, kind of all the cool apps, built it, on the front end to be consumer facing, but technologically strong on the back end. And then the biggest leading indicator, I think that we've onto something massive, is we've diverted 30% of our panel from at least one ED diversion. So when you extrapolate that now that we're rolling out nationally with all these payers, the numbers get really, really big. And so that is Karoo in a nutshell.
Wow. So let me try, level set for folks. So in a typical world, you go to a cardiologist or I guess an intervention cardiologist that will put like a stent in your arteries to let blood circulate, because I guess arteries clog up.
Yeah. So the way to think about it, Flavio, is like a cardiologist, you have the non-invasive cardiologists, which are general cardiologists treating you. And then you have the interventionalists, obviously, that are doing the procedures.
And so typically the model is the more, stents you put in and procedures you do, the more you get paid. So then the incentive, which you're saying, is like just to do more of them, even for people who, now they don't need them, but they're maybe on the, borderline. And so that is, just to make sure I understand, because that's kind of the cause of, or the issue here, right? Is that the people are getting.
No, I mean, so you have two things. So you have one of the system. I think, Charlie Munger said it best, right? Like, show me an incentive, I'll show you an outcome, right? Where like you are incentivized to do as much procedures, but also nowadays it's because there's this compression of fee for service rates. So these physicians are having to do infinitely more than they used to make the same income, right? So they're having to see more patients, and they've kind of thrown up their hands saying like, okay, there's got to be an alternative way where we go in and solve and say, hey, we can help you, free you up for more patients, keep them out of the ED. Again, our patients typically on average before Karoo, they go to the ED about 8 to 10 times a year, right?
What's ED?
Emergency department. So ER. So they run to the emergency room for whatever it may be. From a procedural perspective, where we help solve for that is really throughput and access for our kind of cardiology interventionalist procedures. So what we're saying is typically these proceduralists will do, or interventionalists will do, as much surgery as they can within the parameters. But what we're saying is, listen, it's a new day and age for cardiovascular care, and specifically the financial viability of a hospital, right? So it's not just it's throughput, do as much as possible, but it's maximizing those surgeries, right? So instead of doing a $2,000 or $3,000 procedure on one of you two, they can do all 20, but they can do right by the patient that, we as Karoo can manage that doesn't get there and need a 2,000, because you're going to make financially more on the patient on a kind of non-invasive, but most importantly, you're going to do right by the patient and give them a better experience.
And so that's value-based care is what you're saying. Is a doctor would partner with a payer. A payer is another name for a health insurance company, and by which the health insurance companies say, hey, this person has cardiovascular disease and it's costing us X. And if you can help us save some money, we'll share some of those savings with you, the doctor. And you're saying that's the value-based care model that is growing in popularity among cardiologists. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, if we tried this, Flavio, 5 years ago, we would have failed 100%, right? But what you're seeing is that compression of fee-for-service rates. You're also seeing the younger generation, I think our generation, that they didn't go to medical school residency to just do these 2-3 assembly line, kind of patient interactions, right? So they want to do more. And there's a way, because the way from a health perspective, we've gotten sicker, right? There's a huge dollar amount that these patients cost the system. So our average patient may cost $45,000 per member per year, which means they cost $45,000. For us, we're putting at risk saying, hey, we could reduce that ED from 10 times to 6, and we'll put up the financial capital, because we know by giving these patients nutrition and health coaching and pharmacy and LCS and the technology and support that they've never been given, like we can keep them out of the ED, provide a better experience for them, and also really free up the cardiologist to see, other patients instead of just flooded by some of those high-risk patients.
And is the net that you're texting people and getting them to do more healthy activities, like eating better or what have you, to go in the
So it's a little bit different. So when you're right, but when the handoff happens, so we're effectuating the care plan on behalf of the cardiologist. So the cardiologist is going to say, hey, Taylor's big key driver of cardiovascular disease is nutrition, right? So we're going to really focus on that, for you, as far as provide the nutrition, where they may say, hey, there may be some food insecurities or some behavioral psychological that goes along with your CHF. We also have an LCSW, right? And a pharmacist to make sure that that medication management is administered correctly, right? So really giving you that support that as a CHF and or a high-risk cardiovascular patient, you have never experienced. And so the adherence tends to be infinitely.
How do you get them to listen? Like that isn't a lot of the challenge that people know the bad behaviors, but they don't, they continue to do them?
It's where the handoff happens. So typically you'll get a vendor, for example, that would get, some deal with a payer, an insurance company. And just like all of us, we get these calls from Aetna, making this up. And Aetna will say, hey, Taylor, you have cardiovascular disease. We want to help you. Go with Karoo. And you're going to be like, who the hell's Karoo? And like, my doctor didn't tell me.
Right.
So part of our kind of the unlock happens in the close proximity and relationship we have with our cardiologist. So the cardiologist is actually recommending and saying, hey, Taylor, based on, your condition, we're recommending you work with our partner, and we're going to basically make that warm handoff, because trust is never highest than it is not only when you are at the office, but if your doctor tells you to do something, right? And so that level of, I'll say, excitement is elevated as a result of like, oh, there's someone who first cares about my condition for the first time. My doctor's telling me, and it's not, there's this delay of I'll do it later, right? And so we're checking them up, checking up with them throughout that. And, this is why we do have that 98% kind of adherence, because the reality is people want to be heard. They want to have people engaged and care about them. And I think we give them that platform, but on their terms. Right. And I think that's some of the reasons why we've been, so successful.
So you're an extension of the doctor in a sense
we're extension of the way that we've always positioned it. Although
Right.
the broader is we're helping reshape cardiovascular care from the payers, from risk, and tying that together with all of our partners.
Well, I thought at one point, maybe I'm mistaken, but didn't you think about having your own doctors? Was it always going to be other doctors?
Flavio, good work. Yeah, so
good memory. I like that.
Good memory a long time ago. So when Karoo started, just like most businesses, they don't evolve into what the original intention was. So for us, we thought at the time we had to build de novo clinics because cardiologists weren't ready to take on risk, and payers, they were interested, but we needed to prove that the model of care worked in order to take that data to other cardiologists and to the payers and say, hey, we have this. What happened during that time was there was all these cardiologists that were upset or, they were over the fee for service, game, and they wanted an alternative payment model. And they went to their payers and said, hey, I want an alternative payment model, not knowing what value-based care is. And the payer said, great, how the hell are you going to do this? And they were like, we have no idea. We were the only ones, I think, that had a website. And then we kind of abandoned the de novo CapEx, all that, and said, oh, our original intention was to kind of enable and partner with cardiologists. And so that's ultimately what we did. And the
seems like that's the hard part. Seems like you said, there are these new cardiologists that are looking to do things different, but the vast majority are not, they're still around and disappear. And so it's changing is the hardest thing to change that mindset kind of cardiologists that have done things the same way for a long time and coming in and say, guys, there's a new game in town and this is where things are heading.
Yeah, I mean, unless they don't feel it, they don't care, right? And so, but they're starting to feel it more now. And you're seeing the payers, now that they know that there's the Karoos of the world, saying, hey, we can continue to compress because we know, it's a better experience. We can all save money. And, we were at this perfect, I'll say, point now where the cardiologists are saying, hey, this sounds fantastic. That I can free it up. There's not a lot of change management, and you're sharing the economics with me has been really, I think, part of what a key driver of our success thus far.
Yeah, I guess so. And it's mainly the non-intervention cardiologists. Your kind of market tends to be the cardiologists that, like I had my LDL and cholesterol was, and I think might still be a little out of control. And so I had a hard time actually taking, because I'm a little younger than what they see. I think they were like, don't worry about it. Come in a few years. But I was like, what do you mean? I'm worried. I want to do something. So it actually took a while to get a cardiologist that would even give me a statin, which is what I wanted. But I guess, but those are the docs you're going for.
Yeah, so right? It's non-invasive patients, but then we're also working with the interventionals because what we're doing is ultimately driving those higher dollar amount steerages with those interventionalists. And most of the time, it's not separate, right? Where when a typical cardiologist group is typically comprised of non-invasive general cardiologist and then kind of interventionalist and then EP, electrophysiologist is usually what comprises a group, right? So we're working with them at every point, but, certainly more on the non-invasive side than the interventionalist, but our model and collaboration touches every entry.
These labels of doctor specialties have always kind of been a mystery to me because that general cardiologist in a lot of ways is like a primary care physician. I know this might sound crazy, but he, the things he was asking and checking up is similar to a primary care physician, except at the end he's going to prescribe a statin, which I guess a primary care doctor doesn't feel comfortable doing. But in terms of the bedside manner, right, and the questions and the lab tests they would look at, it seems like very similar. But maybe sorry,
listen, I think on this may appear more, but the level of training, right, to unlock that specifically around cardiovascular is kind of
Right.
far exceeds that, right? So,
Maybe
like
not the most
like you're
flex.
saying, Flavio, you play tennis. There's people out there, they make it look really easy, even though it's not.
Oh, and I wasn't the most complex patient. So
Yes.
your point is taken. Another thing I want to ask is about. So it sounds like groups of cardiologists is who you're aiming at, but there's huge consolidation in the industry where giant hospital-based systems are buying up scooping up all the cardiologists. I remember building Troy is the hardest thing to find a cardiologist, and especially intervention cardiologist in the area, because there was only one. And the hospital owns them, and they won't sign a contract. I'm getting like elevated heart rate just thinking about the process. But anyway, the idea being that the health system owns a lot of the cardiologists, so it's hard for these little guys to compete. And then let me ask you, I guess, is hospital systems also a potential customer for you, or how do you view that?
Yeah, they're all right. I think the entry point is a little bit different, but we service, health system, large multi-specialty, as well as like the private equity backed cardiology groups. And then, at an enterprise, we do less of the independent mom and pop cardiologist and more of the enterprise. So, our groups tend to have 10, 20, 50, 100 cardiologists. They're very big platforms if they are independent or, kind of networked from a private equity perspective, but we service and built our model to scale, and service every, factor of cardiac.
I think that, so if someone, like, I'm not in healthcare, right? So if someone's not in healthcare and they're listening to this conversation, I think their concern is they're like, I can never work in healthcare. And it's because there's so many acronyms. And a lot of my friends, especially in Kentucky, are in healthcare. And I listen to them talk like the way you two are. You're both in healthcare. And I'm like, how is this approachable to an outsider? So if I'm a young, not necessarily in age, but if I'm a young and experienced founder, a potential founder, and if I'm listening to this thinking, holy cow, I can never work in healthcare, what would you kind of say to that person? Is it, you grew up the son of OBGYN, so it's quite literally in your blood, this. So is it that, people should avoid healthcare as a business or as an industry to go into if it's not in their blood? How would you kind of approach that to someone who's an outsider?
It just takes time, like everything, right? I think you and I were talking a little bit about well-known defense contractor, like you work in contracting, like, for government procurement, like there's acronyms and things and its complexities, like that it just takes time and it can feel intimidating, right, to an outsider. But the reality is like, if you are someone who wants to make a difference, who is mission driven, there's no better place to me than trying to solve healthcare. And if you are halfway intelligent, right, like it's not rocket science. Like these acronyms, it may feel intimidating, but it's just like everything where you have to chip away. I didn't wake up, although seemingly it's in my blood. I started my career in sports, right? And then transferred into healthcare. And it takes many, many, many years. And there's even things within healthcare that I don't know, right? Like I know nothing when Flavio actually like about the PBM space. Nothing at all, couldn't tell you anything. And like, so there's just, you understand what those niches is and then kind of what the macro trends are. And you read as much as possible, right? Like you get up and you read the journals, you read the, like Blake Madden, like hospitologies of the world, like those type of things. And you just start taking it in, right? It's like everything else. Like,
niches make riches.
Like a SaaS. Yeah, exactly.
Well, it's $4 trillion of healthcare. So lots of niches.
There's lots of niches. But, I know nothing about... Go ahead, Flavio, sorry.
Well, with the government being, the largest payer and rules always changing around, administration changing around, I'm wondering, how do you view your interface with the government? What kind of things are you doing to kind of...
Someone who grew up in DC, I think I don't overlook the importance of the government from a lobbying perspective on bureaucratic regulated businesses such as healthcare, right? And so we've taken an approach from lessons learned from others and other well-known, highly regulatory industries. And we've started lobbying really from almost our inception. And so what that means is, we're helping architect for CMMI and CMS, that's our goal of what these kind of cardiac, they call it value-based care contracts look like. Because what happened is there is models that exist within nephrology, oncology, primary care, but cardiology is in its infancy. And so what we're doing is saying, hey, this is the biggest spend we have in America. It's getting worse. We've done it as Karoo. Let us help architect what these contracts look like that then you can deploy, nationally and to the benefit of, kind of the, Americans across the country. Right. And so it's been a really big part that we've started earlier as opposed to latter or later, because we think that there's a huge unlock there for ultimately the amount of patients that we can have an impact on.
What does that look like? Do you have to buy tickets to dinners with politicians, or how?
No, I mean, listen.
How does somebody
we hire lobbyists, right? Like that have lived and breathed that world for long, and then they're the ones maneuvering through, help guiding us, and we're there to support obviously those initiatives. But yes, this Taylor, when you talked about even though I grew up and have connections there, still a world I don't completely understand. Right. So it's always better to hire people who are experts at that can actually drive that change that you want, as opposed to me trying to figure it out.
Yeah, I remember when we did this, the lobbyist was in Alabama, and don't you have to be in DC to do this? And apparently, no, I guess some of them just have these relationships, fly in for the key events and then go back. So yeah, but I guess part of it is getting your message in front of the right people on the right committee.
It's helping shaping, and it's getting the key stakeholders saying, hey, cardiologists want to do this. We have a model. We have the demand for this. The payers also, government is the largest payer, but other private payers that are looking to you and guidance like they always have for that guidance.
So sounds very secretive. So I'm not gonna push it. I mean, what happens behind? Maybe you don't want to know, what's behind the curtain. But I want to move on to GLP-1s. It seems like these days.
What are GLP-1s, Flavio? Like Ozempic?
They are these drugs. I don't know what GLP stands for. Maybe. Let's see, glucagon-like peptide 1 receptor agonist. I guess there's these, if you take them, you lose weight. You're not hungry anymore. You just take this injection, although now they come in pill form too, and then you're not hungry. So then you don't eat. And if you don't eat, you lose weight. It's pretty straightforward. But I know several people who it made tremendous change, just the most incredible change I've seen in weight in people ever.
Don't they make you stop craving alcohol and stuff too? There are other effects?
Maybe. I'm not sure about alcohol. Maybe it's more sugary stuff. You just feel full. It's just like after you eat a giant tomahawk steak, and then you're like, oh my God, I can't eat anymore. You feel like that. So you really feel it would be painful for you to eat. But I'm sure with a cocktail or a beer, yeah, for sure, it would have, yeah, you're probably right, the alcohol too. But the other thing is the more research they do, the more benefits they find of these miracle drugs. And one of them is that supposedly they do help with cardiovascular health and reduce the risk of potential heart attacks, strokes, and that. I guess I'm wondering, what do you think of that? Is that even true? And how do you view this?
I mean, I view it as, we've developed a model of care that's consisted of, kind of the nutrition, the health coaching, what we believe is those wraparound, right? I think early indications from a GLP does have, obviously benefits. I think the issue now is that we've made such inroads and gains through our existing model of care. And while I think GLP, as we continue to scale, does have a place within, our existing model of care, ultimately at this current state, the price point far exceeds the worth for us, given the impact that we have on a regular basis with our patients, right? And so, yes, maybe, but only when that price point is dropped to a level where, financially, it's financially viable for us to incorporate that into, our day-to-day model of care.
Yeah, it's incredible. People want this so much that it's forced even people who can't. Like the dishwasher at our co-working space where I work, Big O, great guy. He's on it, and I mean he does not make a lot of money, and so there's all these kind of first ways to reduce costs, but also people are willing to put this is one of the
He's
highest
paying out.
priorities.
He's paying out of pocket.
Yeah, it's paying less than maybe like 60% less than the typical
Wow.
price, but it's still a lot. So yeah, he's like people are willing to go to great lengths to, there's some ways to get them cheaper, but I guess we'll see. I don't want to belabor this point too, but I do think there's a lot of change happening there.
Yeah.
And then I noticed you worked in IVF, and so I in vitro fertilization, helping women with pregnancy, which is another huge area that's boomed over the last few years. And I guess what I'm wondering is, like, what was your experience working in that space? Because you didn't end up starting a business in that space, even though you knew a lot about it. So I'm like wondering, like, what's your conclusion from your experience working? I guess it was with labs and clinics in the IVF space.
Yeah, I mean, I've spent the majority of at least start of my healthcare career around kind of broadly women's health, like more specifically first kind of in obstetrics and gynecology, and then in, kind of IVF, right? Reproductive. And so, again, I think that I always take this from my dad. I always asked him, hey, when you were going through medical school or residency, like, why'd you pick to be OBGYN? And he said, it's the only specialty, and he was exaggerating a little bit, but it's the only specialty where they're happy to see me and you get to help them give the most precious thing in the world, which is, helping birthing a child, right? And so I think for that, there's, it's really great to see that end result. I mean, now that I have 3 kids, right? It's they're the most precious things in the world. And, it was a pleasure working, kind of both on the obstetric side and then on the IVF side.
So it sounds like you have a very positive view of this, because I guess a lot of people feel that it's like this industry that's charging women a lot for this. It's very valuable. People are willing to spend any amount, but like, why is it so expensive, right? Like, is it just like GLP-1s because we can, right? We made this drug. It's like helps everybody, so you're just gonna pay whatever we say you're gonna pay. Is it similar in that?
Yeah. So yes, I think there's two driving factors to that. One, it is the most precious thing and it's priceless, right? Like your child. So you're willing to pay anything. There's no science on it's more in terms of just raw cost to produce from an IVF, but it is something that it is priceless, right? So you're willing to pay that. I also think that there is, relative to other industries, there is a shortage of supply of REI infertility physicians, right, who can do that, right? And so you have the demand of IVF and you have a limited amount of physicians who can actually, see that subspecialty, right? I think, and please check me on this, but I think there's only 40, last I remembered, it was like 40 something fellowships per year across the entire country of new REI docs. And please fact check that. I think it's something like
REI is...
What's REI? REI is like a co-op where they have outdoor... I bought my tent from REI.
They also do IVF in the back.
Yeah, they do IVF in the back.
The reproductive endocrinology and infertility. That's so interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah, I mean,
there's just not enough slots.
Check me on that. But the amount that comes out every year. Okay, I was wrong. So there's 49 accredited REI programs per year.
I mean, you were pretty close.
I was close on it. And so, yes, it is one of those things where there's just not that many, which
interesting.
And then I think
you need 4 years of medical school, 4 years of and another 3 years of REI fellowship. So 11 years after college, you have to spend another 11 years. So you're 32 at the earliest by the time you can make a paycheck.
Seems like a good business opportunity for any of the entrepreneurs out there going to IVF.
Yeah, that's wild. Well, look, man, this has been amazing. As we wrap up, want to ask kind of what advice do you have for especially healthcare entrepreneurs getting started today? Like Taylor said, it can sound like super overwhelming. There's so many challenges. But I guess, what do you typically advise folks going that route?
I mean, listen, I think I have a little bit harsher view and advice that I typically give to, kind of aspiring entrepreneurs. And I think one of the things that I often say is like, don't be a whiteboard founder because you're not going to be successful, right? And when I say whiteboard, like you draw it up and you're like, this could be a great idea. Let's go after that. I think, if you're going to have a chance of being successful as an entrepreneur, like you have to be obsessive about it. But, being an entrepreneur sucks. Like it's the worst thing. It's not fun. I mean, there's elements that are fun, but, by and large, like you're sacrificing time with family. There's very few people on the planet that understand what you're going through. You're seemingly, even the worldview of success, you're constantly battling, things that people in the public don't see. Right. And so you really have to be obsessive and kind of mission driven of saying like, hey, like at all costs, I want to move the fucking needle. Right. But it's not. Right. And so if you're not prepared to sacrifice, then you're probably not going to be successful. Right. And I tend to have positive, I say negative of, a lot of this. I think there's been this move towards, hey, let's be an entrepreneur. And just yesterday, one of my wife's cousins worked at very well-known, the big Mag 7, most of his career, made tons of money, wanted to do a startup, lasted 3 months. I texted him yesterday. I was like, how's it going? He's like, this startup world's not for me. Right? Like it takes that, a glutton for punishment. I do think that there's an architect. I think if you look in kind of a history, most entrepreneurs have some trauma. They tend to have a certain architect than others, right? I know for me, like I got kicked out of a bunch of schools. I would always challenge authority. I created a curb painting business because I didn't want to have a job in high school. Like all of those things, you can kind of be like, oh, okay, it makes sense why you are who you are. But it is very difficult for a Mag 7, someone at Google to be like, I'm going to give up this cushy lifestyle to go work 18-hour days, not see my family, sacrifice everything and make little money. Like, but
what's Mag 7?
The Magnificent Seven. So like Facebook, Google, NVIDIA, like the top 7 in the S&P.
Never heard it called Mag 7. That's a good.
Yeah, Magnificent 7. See, teach you something every day. See, there's my wisdom.
I know.
There you go.
Yeah,
so that's
I like it.
The advice is like, listen, be obsessive about it and go for it. But I think you have to be mentally strong that like it's not fun, like doing this. I mean, again, elements, but don't just do it because you want to say you're an entrepreneur.
I do have to push back a little bit that it is quite fun. But parts of it are quite fun. It's a lot of why we do it, right?
Parts of it are
the beginning
fun.
and the end.
Yeah. The beginning and the end are very fun.
Yeah, it's the 10-year overnight success, right? Like there's parts and elements that you enjoy. I mean, listen, I have been blessed of some of our investors. Flavio, I'll put you in there, big guy. Some of our investors are some of the most successful entrepreneurs on the planet. Being around them, that they have 2-3 standard deviations above the mean in terms of raw intelligence, like just fascinated by the insights. Like that part is fun and really cool. But then there's the, day-to-day grind of being an entrepreneur that, isn't all Care Bears and sunshine.
Not all Care Bears and sunshine. So as we start to wrap up here, we'll end with a hack. The hack could be a pillow. It could be an app. It could be a new technique that you have. It could be a morning routine. It could be any of those things. I'll go first and then Flavio, you want to go. So mine is a little different than this mug. When I was going to grab this mug this morning, it reminded me of it. So no, probably can't see it, but it says Corvette, made in Kentucky, by the way. Nobody knows that. All the Corvettes in the world, made in Kentucky. Just shout out. Bowling Green,
What
Kentucky.
about the mugs? Are they made in Kentucky?
The mugs are not made in Kentucky. Definitely not made in America. But the Corvettes are, so there's a Corvette factory in Bowling Green, Kentucky. It's like 2 hours outside Louisville. There's a racetrack there that they recently built, like in the last 10 years. And you can go and you can race. You pick which Corvette you want to drive, and then you can race it around the track. They record it for you. It's super great. So my hack is go do that. But the real hack is my dad, in passing, said to me, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, that he'd always wanted to drive a Corvette. And so I made a note on my phone. I have this list of ideas in my notes app on my phone. And I was like, one day I want to do that for my dad. Like I want to do it with my dad, for my dad. And so my life hack is make notes of those things when people in your life say them and then make them happen. So I surprised my dad and bought him this racetrack. I raced with him. We each raced separately, but it was so freaking cool. And the pictures, and I bought this mug and I bought him a mug too to kind of commemorate it so that I see it now, it's in our mug collection. And when I see it, it just warms my heart and makes me feel really, really good. And we're going to a Kentucky basketball game. Kentucky just beat Duke last night. Anybody's NCAA fan. Huge game. And so my dad's also a Kentucky fan. So, he lives in Kentucky. And so I'm trying to do more to maximize those experiences with my parents. And I'd highly encourage anyone to do that. It doesn't have to cost a lot of money, right? But just like creating special experiences with your parents. That's my life hack, because we're not all going to be here forever. And those moments and those experiences, I think, are very, very special. Flavio, what about you?
Yeah, it occurs to me Kentucky should be sponsoring the pod here. This is, and
I have a tourism hack, Kentucky tourism.
Yeah, one of the companies I'm involved with, the guys are really close with the governor of Kentucky. So maybe we can do something. So we could do something here. But my hack is this website. If you want to buy or sell used furniture, we had to get rid of this expensive table we got, and it's kind of hard to do. And so we use this website called APTDeco, APTDeco, DECO.com. And it's good to buy and sell. And list on there, and they can even have the buyer kind of pay for and they just come get it. So big, and you can buy stuff there too, just like cheaper, used furniture. That's pretty nice. So that's my hack.
Got it.
Ian.
I guess so. My hack is I am pretty busy, but with three kids. So my hack, I don't know if it's because of out of necessity or sanity, but I actually go to the gym at 4:30 in the morning every day, no matter what, wherever I am in any city. And for me, it's just, my time to just clear my head, think about kind of the day, reflect, and also just, count blessings before I have to either, go back home and, deal with, three crazy kids and everything else in the day and the responsibilities. So that's kind of my hack and has really unlocked for me just like everything and is a great start to the day. Kind of sets the tone as well.
4:30 is intense.
That's so early.
That's so early. I'm on the West Coast and that's early.
I often, fall asleep, with my kids at like 8:30. So.
At the gym? Oh.
Yeah. I fall asleep at night. So I can
treadmill.
The treadmill.
Fall asleep in the treadmill.
Yeah. Appreciate you so much, Ian, coming on board the Founder Secrets today. And we'll talk soon.
Thanks, Ian. Safe travels.
Thanks, Taylor.
Thank you for rocking with the homies. Taylor, Trusty, and Flavio. Seize the day, own it. Until next time, hold it down, hold it down. Hey.